On December 7, 1941, Hawaii's naval base Pearl Harbor was attacked by Japanese bomber planes. Franklin Delano Roosevelt used this attack as an opportunity to encourage the United States Congress to declare war against the Axis powers of Europe and Asia, and thus enter into World War II. This war required nations to throw their economic, industrial, and scientific capabilities behind their war efforts. This war would result in over 20 million deaths on both sides, and even more casualties. However, in 1941, as Adolf Hitler wreaked havoc across Europe, and the Imperial Army of Japan devastated Asia, Mr. Jack Hubbard was still attending high school in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, because the war was winding down when Mr. Hubbard graduated from high school, most military training programs were being washed out, and he entered the Army Air Corps as a corporal.
Why did you decide to enlist? Did you have any relatives that influenced you?
Well, my uncle was a big Air Force guy, and he turned out to be a general, and he was kind of my role model, so I always was very military minded, so that's what happened. And you have to remember, I think some dates would be in order so that you get the context of everything.
Yeah.
I went to high school, Belmont High School in Los Angeles. Ever hear of it? Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay. I graduated in 1944, June of 1944. And I was in the Reserve Officer Training Corps all the time I was in school, the ROTC. Graduated as a first lieutenant, which was kind of neat. During that time, the World War II is, with your time frames, that's what's really going on, heavy. So all the kids were gung-ho to get in, So that's what led me to go ahead and get in. And for your information, my date of enlistment, I had to look some of these things up a little bit. My date of enlistment was the 29th of June, 1944. Okay? I think I mentioned my uncle, who became a brigadier general.
Yeah.
In fact, he was an interesting guy. He made the first radar bombing on Japan. And so he had a lot of medals and all that stuff. And my wife, interestingly enough, had one brother that was with General Patton in Europe, and another brother was in the Pacific, killed during the war. So we have kind of a military family to a certain extent.
Did you complete any other training besides ROTC at your high school?
I think I mentioned my formal enlistment date was June 29, 1945. That was done down at Fort MacArthur down in San Pedro. I don't know whether that outfit is still down there or not, but anyway, that's where it was. And at that time, I'd been qualified for the aviation cadet program, which would be you'd go to school for flight training, flight was all encompassing. At that time it included pilot, bombardier, or navigator, and that's what you would be doing. So you get that training and you graduate as a second lieutenant with the wings and gung-ho. So, but at the same time, I could have started that. They offered me a program called the Army Specialized Training Reserve Program, called ASTRP for short. And what that involved was kind of a basic engineering course. And they had a number of colleges around. I went to the University of Utah for, it was a 9-month course, which is the equivalent of a 2-year engineering course. Now you know how we crammed for that. And I have a certificate for it up here.
How were your first days of service after training?
The first days, well, they're always exciting because, even though when I found out I wasn't going to really get what I wanted or do what I wanted, it wasn't that good. But the first days, because you're meeting guys and you travel, you get on a train, go to someplace, go to basic training, or you go here or there, and it's pretty exciting. So I ended up, or they sent me, however you want to put it, to overseas, to the island of Luzon in the Philippines. And that was at a base called Clark Air Force Base. It's very close to the Bataan Death March. I'll mention that too again. So I was in an outfit called the 576th Air Materiel Squadron, which meant that we could fly, transport material, take care of material for the base, and all that sort of thing. And those things, when I say material, that means things like anything from guns, bombs, taking care of airplanes, arming the airplanes. So there's a whole lot of stuff just what the name implies. It's air support. So I became a corporal, and I was there at Clark Field for about 9 months.
The Bataan Death March began on April 9, 1942, and involved forcibly transferring 60,000 American and Filipino POWs for 80 miles. This march resulted from the lack of Japanese preparation for the large influx of war prisoners. Some cruel treatments, including burning prisoners alive in self-dug graves, resulted in the deaths of 10,000 Filipinos and 650 Americans. Characterized by wide-range physical abuse and murder, this march was later judged to be a Japanese war crime. Prisoners risked being stabbed simply for falling down or falling behind marching pace. This restaurant, The Snark, on Luzon Island, on the highway of the Death March, was frequented by Jack Hubbard during his service in the Pacific. How did you view the liberation of the Philippines?
Well, it's interesting. I was able to see that and get acquainted with some of the Philippine people. And, they were nice people. They've been through a lot, believe me. Felt sorry for them. I was able to get down to see Manila, and of course Manila was devastated. The Japanese had just bombed it to terrible. And then they had horrible fighting there in that, I think it was called the Rizal Stadium, there where the Japanese held out for a long time, but it was not good. I met a friend down there. He was in the infantry in Manila. It was kind of interesting. And he was able to tell me a few things. But, how did I feel? I guess you just feel sorry for anybody that has to go through those kind of things, So, Japan surrendered on the 2nd of September 1945 in Tokyo Bay on the USS Missouri. And you know why the USS Missouri? It was supposed to be on the Iowa. We have a good friend that was a Marine on the Iowa. It's supposed to be on the battleship Iowa. But Truman was president, he was from Missouri, so he made it to the Missouri. So they had to do it on the USS Missouri.
Shortly after the liberation of Luzon, where Mr. Hubbard was stationed, and the rest of the Philippine Islands, on September 2, 1945, the Empire of Japan officially surrendered to the Allies. The entire surrender ceremony only took 23 minutes, and the Japanese Foreign Minister Shigemitsu Mamoru signed it. During the surrender ceremony, the deck of the USS Missouri was decorated with the 31-star American flag that had been taken ashore by Commodore Matthew Perry in 1853 when opening up Japan's ports to trade. This ended Mr. Hubbard and America's participation in the World War II Pacific Theater.
Do you recall the day your service ended? How was it?
I recall it, but it wasn't too monumental. It was when I got back up to Fort Campbell up here from overseas. Army of the United States Honorable Discharge. How's that? I'm going to give it to you right what it says here. Okay? 18 December 1946. They say to you, and I think an officer, you go ahead and have a little interview. They say, because you've indicated that you'd like to get out. Remember, so you had to enlist, and they had you for that time. They could have kept me if they wanted to, but because of the wind down and so on that we talked about, they call it discharged for the convenience of the government.
Yeah.
So that was that deal.
How did your military service affect your life later on?
Well, that's pretty easy to say. Since I was very disappointed that I was not able to fulfill my military career. So I kind of put that behind me, the military, and went on into business. And I had a reasonably successful career in sales and marketing. So I was pretty busy, and then get married, raise a family. We've been here in this home about 40 years now, 45, and our kids went to the school across the street here, Edison High School, and I traveled a lot, and so the military was, kind of, I always have that love for the military.